My husband claimed he was kidnapped while on a business trip. But when I discovered he was actually vacationing with his secret family, his excuse was beyond ridiculous. I used to think my life was normal, even a bit boring at times. My name's Mia Anderson. 37 years old, mom to Marcus and Emma, and wife of 12 years to Will Anderson, senior marketing consultant at a big shot company based in Chicago. I run a small baking business from our kitchen, and while it's no million-dollar venture, it gives me the satisfaction of making my own money. Will was our main breadwinner, and although his work required a lot of travel, I always saw him as a steady, reliable husband. And for a while, that was enough. But then came last April, and with it, an upheaval I could never have imagined. It all started on a Thursday morning. I was in the middle of frosting a batch of mini lemon cakes for a last-minute order, my go-to true crime podcast playing in the background. Marcus and Emma were at school, and I was enjoying the rare quiet of the house. Will was supposedly in Seattle on one of his business trips. He'd left 2 days ago, and everything felt routine. He'd texted me that morning, sent a photo of a fancy coffee shop, said he'd call in the evening to say goodnight to the kids. Business as usual. Just as I was finishing up, my phone buzzed. I wiped my hands on my apron, assuming it was Will checking in. "Hello, this is Mia," I answered casually, not recognizing the number. "Mrs. Anderson?" The voice on the other end asked, firm and official sounding. "Yes, this is she," I replied, glancing at my phone screen again. Definitely a Seattle area code. "This is Officer Ramirez with the Seattle Police Department. I need to discuss something about your husband, William Anderson." I nearly dropped the phone. My mind went blank, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Is he okay? Did something happen?" I stammered, imagining every possible worst-case scenario. "He's physically fine, ma'am," the officer replied carefully. "But he was involved in an incident last night. He was found intoxicated at a downtown bar and claimed he'd been kidnapped." "Kidnapped?" I echoed, my voice barely more than a whisper. I started pacing around the kitchen, trying to understand what I'd just heard. "Kidnapped? Will? My risk-averse, straight-laced husband?" "Yes, ma'am," the officer continued. "According to him, he'd been taken against his will by unknown individuals. However, his story has been inconsistent." "What do you mean inconsistent?" I asked, gripping the counter, trying to stay calm. The officer hesitated, as if carefully choosing his words. "Your husband was unable to provide us with any details about the alleged kidnapping. No descriptions of the people or vehicles involved, and no specific locations. He's been staying at a 5-star resort in downtown Seattle, and his hotel records confirmed he checked in without any issues. It's likely he may have fabricated the story." I took a deep breath, trying to wrap my head around the situation. Will was staying at a resort, lying about being kidnapped? My hands shook as I tried to keep my voice steady. "Do you need me to come there?" I asked, the words feeling heavy and wrong. "No, ma'am. We released him after determining there was no immediate danger. But I thought you should know." I thanked him, barely able to get the words out, and ended the call. I felt numb. My head was spinning with questions, and I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Will had lied, that much was obvious. But why? And what was he doing at a resort? My mind raced with suspicion and anger. That night, for the first time ever, Will didn't call to say goodnight to the kids. He didn't text, either. I kept staring at my phone, waiting for a message or call that never came. I didn't reach out to him either. I was angry, but more than that, I wanted to hear his explanation. If he didn't have a good reason, I wasn't sure what I'd do. 3 days later, he finally came home. He opened the door quietly, as if hoping not to wake me, but I'd been sitting in the living room, waiting, for hours. I took one look at him and felt a surge of anger and hurt I could barely contain. He looked different. His normally pristine appearance was replaced by something tired, almost haunted. He was unshaven, his hair a mess, and he couldn't meet my eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hey?" I replied, standing up, crossing my arms over my chest. "That's all you've got?" Will shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Look, Mia. It's been a rough week. Can we just talk after I've had a shower?" "Talk?" I repeated, voice laced with sarcasm. "Oh, we're definitely going to talk, Will. About Seattle. About that kidnapping story you told the police. They called me, you know. Told me all about it. So I'd love to hear your side." His face paled, and he took a step back, as if my words had physically hit him. "Mia, listen. I didn't mean for things to get so complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Complicated how, Will? You lied about being kidnapped. The police found you at a 5-star resort, and they called me. So why don't you start with the truth for once?" He looked at me, his face a mix of shame and fear. All right. Can we just sit down?" "Oh, you want to sit down now?" I asked, feeling my anger boil over. Fine. Sit down. And start talking. Will took a seat on the edge of the couch, rubbing his hands together as if trying to gather courage. Mia, I know how this sounds. But these trips haven't just been about business. I stared at him, waiting, my patience stretched thin. What does that mean, Will? Just say it. He swallowed hard, his hands shaking slightly. I met someone. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I gripped the back of the chair for support. You met someone? I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, he admitted, his voice raw with shame. Her name is Sarah. We met a few months ago. She's from Seattle. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. So that's where you were? With her? He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Yes. But Mia, please. It's not what you think. Oh, really? I snapped, feeling the hurt and betrayal twist into rage. So what exactly should I think, Will? You've been lying to me, to our kids, pretending to go on business trips when you were off with her. How long has this been going on? Since last fall, he whispered, the guilt evident on his face. But Mia, please. It was never supposed to be serious. I shook my head, unable to believe the words coming out of his mouth. Not supposed to be serious? You lied to me. You lied to our kids. And you made up some ridiculous kidnapping story to cover your tracks. Do you even realize how insane that sounds? I know, he muttered, running a hand over his face. I panicked. I didn't know what to say. Sarah got upset that I wouldn't stay, so she locked me out of the hotel room. I went to a bar too. To clear my head, and the story just came out. I didn't know how else to explain it. I felt the weight of his betrayal settle over me, crushing, suffocating. I took a deep breath, fighting back tears. So, what? You just decided that faking a kidnapping was easier than telling the truth? Will looked down, his hands shaking. I'm sorry, Mia. I didn't know how to handle it. I laughed again, but it sounded foreign, detached. You didn't know how to handle it? Will, you've torn our family apart. You've been living a lie, and I've been here, holding everything together, raising our kids, running the house, believing in you. He looked up, tears in his eyes. Mia, please. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you, I do. I got lost. I didn't know how to stop. Stop? I asked, my voice breaking. You're telling me you've been lying to me for nearly a year, and now you want me to believe you're sorry? Yes, I am, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to lose you, Mia. I don't want to lose the kids. You already have, I replied coldly. You made your choice when you decided to lie. When you decided to be with her. When you decided that we weren't enough for you. The silence hung heavy between us, the weight of everything unsaid filling the room. Finally, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I want you to leave, Will. I need time to think, to figure out what to do next. Because right now, I can't even look at you. Mia, please. Just go, I said, my voice breaking. Go. He stood there for a moment, as if hoping I'd change my mind, but I turned away, unable to bear the sight of him. I heard him grab his keys, and then the door closed quietly behind him. For weeks after that, I barely slept. I didn't know how to explain it to the kids, so I told them he was away for work. Marcus and Emma were young enough not to question it, but I knew they felt the change. They'd ask about him, and I'd smile and say, Daddy will be home soon. But inside, I felt like I was breaking apart. Finally, after months of painful conversations and legal paperwork, the divorce went through. Will moved out, and I focused on rebuilding our lives, creating some semblance of stability for the kids. It wasn't easy, and there were days I thought I'd never be okay again. But I had to be strong for them. In the end, I learned that sometimes the people we think we know best can surprise us in the worst ways. I never expected to be here, a single mom, starting over, but maybe it was for the best. I learned that I was stronger than I ever thought possible. And who knows? Maybe someday, I'll be able to trust again. After months of piecing myself back together, managing the house on my own, and supporting the kids as best I could, I began to feel a little spark of something unfamiliar, power. With Will out of the house and the divorce finalized, I finally had control over my life. No more secrets, no more deceit. But the bitterness of his betrayal lingered, gnawing at me every day. And then one afternoon, I got a call that changed everything. Hello, Mrs. Anderson? Said the voice on the other end, overly polite. This is Mia. Anderson was my married name, I replied, keeping my tone as even as possible. I had dropped Will's last name like dead weight as soon as the divorce was final. Who's calling? My name is James Carter, he said. I'm a family lawyer from Seattle. I represent Sarah Whitman, Williams, partner. The word hit me like a punch to the gut, but I steadied myself. What can I help you with, Mr. Carter? The lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitman and her son are facing some financial difficulties. Apparently, Mr. Anderson, your former husband, is, shall we say, behind on his commitments to her and their child. I couldn't help it, I laughed. A harsh, bitter laugh that felt like a release. Oh, really? I said. And what does that have to do with me? Well, Mrs. Whitman mentioned that Mr. Anderson's finances seem stretched thin. She suggested that perhaps his obligations to you might be renegotiated so that he can, make good on his promises to her. In that moment, something clicked. Will had abandoned us, lied to us, and tried to juggle two families, and now he was drowning in his own mess. A wave of satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't exactly revenge, but it was close enough. Mr. Carter, let me make this very clear. Will Anderson's obligations to me and his children are legally binding. As for Mrs. Whitman, well, she made her choices. I'm sure she and her lawyer can figure out how to get him to pay up. And just so you know, Will didn't exactly leave me in the best financial situation, either. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go. I hung up, feeling a thrill run through me. He had thought he could have it all, and now it was unraveling. But it didn't end there. The next morning, after dropping off the kids at school, I went down to my lawyer's office. My attorney, Camille, was brilliant, sharp, and had taken my case with a passion that was rare to find. I told her about the call from Mr. Carter and asked if there was anything we could do to protect what was left of my financial stability from Will's impending implosion. Camille raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the opportunity for some creative legal maneuvers. Actually, Mia, I think there's something we can do. He can't reduce his child support payments, but if his debts pile up, he may start missing them. We could file a lien against his assets, a kind of insurance if you will, to make sure you and the kids are prioritized. The idea was brilliant. A lien would make sure that, even if he lost everything, our children wouldn't. The paperwork took weeks, but Camille was relentless. Will had no idea, of course. And that was just the beginning. A few months later, I heard from an old friend, Jesse, who worked in HR for a company in Chicago that often interacted with Will's firm. Over coffee, she told me something that made me smile from ear to ear. He's been missing work, Jessie said, sipping her latte. Word is he's had to pawn off a bunch of stuff. And his new girlfriend's really putting the squeeze on him. I heard from someone who works with her that she started getting impatient, especially since she found out about the lien. My smile was so big it hurt. Did you know that Will's firm has a reputation clause? Jessie continued, raising her eyebrow. If there's anything to tarnish their image or any kind of scandal, they don't hesitate to cut ties with employees. Apparently, he's on thin ice. That's fascinating, I replied, feigning casual interest. But inside, I was thrilled. As time went by, I started hearing more about Will's struggles through mutual friends and a few quiet updates from Jessie. His situation had gone from bad to worse. Between his responsibilities to Sarah and their child and the ironclad lien I'd placed on his assets, his finances were spiraling. Sarah had left him, furious that he was, in her words, a deadbeat who couldn't even keep his affairs straight. Will finally hit rock bottom a few months later. By then, I had fully moved on, focused on my kids and growing my baking business. But when I got a call from an unknown number late one Friday night, something told me it was him. Hello? I answered, already bracing myself. Mia, it's me, Will said, his voice shaky, a shadow of the man I used to know. Listen, I know I've made mistakes. Big mistakes. And I just wanted to ask if there's any way. If we could. Renegotiate, the child support? I'm really struggling here, Mia. I have nothing left. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. All those sleepless nights, the betrayal, the lies, and the pain he put me through, all of it had brought us here. I felt an odd sense of peace, but I didn't gloat. Instead, I chose my words carefully. Will, I said, my tone calm but firm, our children deserve a stable future. You made your choices, and now you're facing the consequences. You didn't think of us when you were living your double life, and you didn't think of us when you made up that insane kidnapping story. I'm sorry for what you're going through, but I can't let you drag us down with you. There was a silence on the other end, broken only by a quiet, defeated sigh. I understand, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. After that, he never called again. I heard from Jesse that Will lost his job a month later. The firm couldn't risk keeping someone with his reputation, especially after word of his financial troubles and personal drama became gossip in the industry. The last I heard, he'd moved back in with his parents, scrambling to pick up the pieces of his life. Meanwhile, I found peace. I channeled my energy into my business, which started booming as word got out about my cakes and pastries. Marcus and Emma were happier, thriving, and we all slowly settled into a new normal. One without lies, without deceit, and without the weight of his betrayal. One evening, as I was closing up shop after a long day, I looked around the cozy little bakery I'd managed to open. Pictures of my kids and artwork they'd made lined the walls. The place was mine, truly mine. I had built something lasting and real, not because I was trying to prove anything to anyone else, but because I finally understood that I didn't need anyone who would lie or betray me. I had all the strength I needed within me. And as I locked the door and headed home that night, I felt a deep, satisfying sense of closure. I had taken back my life, my independence, and my happiness. In the end, he lost everything, and I'd found something far more valuable: peace, self-respect, and a future of my own making. Some might call it karma, but to me, it was just justice finally catching up.